Welcome to Shop Talk. I'm Brandi.
This is James, and we talk about all things related to cross-cultural workers and mental health.
Great. We're glad you're here. And welcome to Season 2. We made it to Season 2.
It's my pleasure to introduce Keith Webb, who for 20 years lived in Japan, Indonesia, and Singapore, working with Church Resource Ministries, a nonprofit organization focused on leadership development. And he actually developed the coach model in 2004 and has an entire network of coaches as he has continued to lead an organization training coaches all over the world. So glad to have you here.
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you.
Anything to add? That was just from your website. So your background.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
I'm really excited to meet you too. And I did notice, Keith, I looked at your website and noticed like some personal things about you. A couple of things. You collect vintage watches, and I'd like to know more about that. Like, tell me the story of that one that you're wearing right now.
Well, the one wearing right now is it's an Omega Speedmaster, and it's with a red dial, which is the Schumacher.
Cool.
Wow.
Michael Schumacher, yeah.
Michael Schumacher version. And my son got into this when he was in college, and I used to buy and sell vintage wristwatches back when I was just out of college, and then I put them away for 30 years. And when he got into it, I pulled out my boxes. So then since then, my wife wants in on it. So we bought her this one I'm wearing.
The one you're wearing. So you bought that for your wife, but you're wearing it. So that's fine.
Yeah, it fits big on her, but it's perfect on me. And she didn't take it this morning. So
there you go.
On my wrist it goes.
And there's probably a story behind each watch too.
Well, I like these mechanical watches because it feels like they've got a heart, a soul, they tick. And there's just so much art and skill that goes into making them and then repairing them and so on. And so I like that it's got that, for me, it's got that cool factor of it's like real, you know.
I gotta go switch watches. I'm wearing my hiking watch, so
yeah, that's good. It's okay. It's a good watch.
It's okay.
It's just kind of boring. Well, I'm just going to do a clunky segue then into coaching, which is your leadership, which is your specialty. Thinking about watches and vintage watches being just the craft and individually made, and just the specialty that goes into them, and just how that can relate to leading people, how you see people as individuals. And, there are principles that work with everyone, but then we're all just so unique. And I wonder what you can tell us, what you've learned about leading people.
A nice analogy of it's right about the watches. So mechanical watches are unique in that they've got their own unique things about them. And yet they still tell time. They have dials, they have hands, for hour hand, minute hand, like that. And it's the same thing with people, and particularly when you're working cross-culturally, there's this, we can have a fallacy two different ways. One way is you can see everybody's the same. Everybody's wanting the same thing. They want to be happy. They want their kids to do better than them, than I did. You've got all these different things that it's all the same. It's the sayings we have in the US of we just put one pant leg on at a time, that kind of thing. That's a fallacy one way. The other fallacy is that everyone is so unique. It's so unique that there's basically, you can go so far that everyone is so unique, there's nothing they can learn from us. I mean, that culture is so unique that, there's the Americans, we have nothing to teach them. And the reality is it's actually these two things, I think, held in tension, is that everybody is absolutely unique, and they're a lot alike with a lot of other people. You get personality test says that you're a whatever, I'm an ENTJ, for example. So, ENTJ, or in the disc, I'm high D and then I and no C.
Or no S.
I no S and I got enough C to be right. This kind of thing. So I'm similar to other people like that, but yet I'm unique, right? And so it's how do you look at people and realize that people are people? That's the similar part. And yet they're unique. And so you have to, I think you have to hold those two tensions together.
Right. Because there are universal truths about people and about humanity. And yet, yeah. And it is an interesting thought to think about holding those two in tension when you're meeting with someone and when you're training people in leadership.
I wonder if we could back up just a little bit and talk about kind of a broader picture of what coaching is, because contextually it can mean different things to different people. And I feel like it's becoming a lot more common and more mainstream. And kind of what is coaching, and how do you do it in terms of the model that you've developed in those trainings, and how is it helpful for cross-cultural workers?
Sure. Well, that just as a start, the context that I started coaching in was cross-cultural. And so the reason I started coaching was because I was working cross-culturally. And I had already done that before in Japan, 10 years, and I was in Indonesia in a different context. And that's what caused me to get into it. And so coaching though means anything to anybody.
Right.
And so so anytime someone's using the word coach, I mean, 75% of the time, they're not talking about what I'm talking about. People, coaching means one-on-one teaching or one-on-one advising or something like this. They're just renaming mentoring coaching, because coaching is the new fad.
Right.
But there actually is a definition of the type of coaching that we're talking about, and that's we go with what the International Coaching Federation defines as coaching, which is it's a non-directive way of helping people to bring change. So you're not giving advice, you're not telling your stories, you're not diagnosing and things like this. And so coaching, for me, the way I define it is coaching is an ongoing, intentional conversation with a person or group that helps people to fully live out God's calling in their life. And so the idea that it's an intentional, ongoing conversation, in other words, it's not a monologue where I tell you things or teach you things. It's a conversation, and it's intentional in that it's going after, or it's doing it in a certain way. And we try and draw, in coaching, we pull out all the content from the client. So all the content comes from the client. The process is a partnership between the coach and the client, and the coach is driving more of the process, but content, no. So we start by finding out what does the client want to work on? What is it they want to work on? And then you might partner as far as the process goes of how would you like to talk about that and work on that today? And you get to hear what they think about that and go from that. And so that is what I'm describing is what the professional world of coaching would call coaching.
Mm-hmm. 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 All right. Keith, on your website, you talk about self-leadership, and I wonder if you can explain that a little bit more to us.
Self-leadership is leading yourself.
Well, thanks for that. Perfect.
And we're done.
Yeah, I'm the master of the obvious.
Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
So it's leading yourself, because if, for example, it's very difficult to coach someone or to, whatever you want to call it, coaching or counseling or spiritual formationing someone through things that you are not aware of yourself. And so it's the same thing. It's part of why cross-cultural does a lot for people's reflection, is because they start culturally, we never made decisions about all those things we think about culturally. We didn't make a decision about, we just have them, right? So it's only when you're faced with a different culture's view of those things that suddenly you're like, well, why do I think that way? What is going on with, why do we do it like that? And it usually starts with, why are they doing it like that? But then it becomes, why am I doing it like that, right? So if you're going to lead yourself, you have to be aware of how you come off with people, the EQ, how you come off with people. You need to be aware of what is the way you think about things, your mindsets, how you need to change, and then what my personality drives me in certain directions that other people's personalities don't drive them. And so what seems natural for me is not natural for other people. And so if you're not aware of any of that, you tend to project all your stuff onto other people. And in other words, what works for you, you think is going to work for everybody else. And because you experienced, someone's experiencing something, let's say a conflict with a boss, and you experience conflict with, oh, I know that happened to me too. And then you just assume that the two experiences are going to be the same, and they're not. So self-leadership is understanding about yourself, and then being able to, of course, then work on that and need some help for that, and to be able to keep growing and changing yourself.
Well, a couple of things I hear is self-awareness is really important. Also, there's an aspect where you really need to be a good listener to other people's stories too. And just because you hear a similarity in someone's story with yours doesn't mean it's going to fit and that you have the answers for it too.
Yeah, well, our brains work off of categorizing things. So as soon as I hear something that sounds familiar to my experience, we start putting their story into our experience, or vice versa. And then we're not really listening to the person, because the emphasis that they have on the story, or the meaning that they draw from that same kind of event, might be entirely different than the meaning I drew from it. And so you do have to watch that if you're going to listen, because otherwise you just start listening. It's confirmation bias. You start listening to confirm what you experienced, or your theory. Because as soon as somebody, let's face it, all of us in the helping world, as soon as somebody starts telling us their story, immediately we got ideas on how to fix it. This is what's happening. I know the diagnosis, and whether you can keep it at this is my theory, or I know what's happening, absolute. Either way, we have these things, right? Mm-hmm. And so you've got to somehow, you don't want to say that's not right, because it actually might fit that pattern, and it might be helpful for you to be able to ask more questions if you've got that pattern in mind. However, if you get too stuck on that, you're going to miss all the nuance of what they're saying.
And your work focuses on working both with cross-cultural workers, and it sounds like you work with a wide variety of worldviews and perspectives.
Yeah, and always have. So my background is, I mentioned ENTJ. So if anybody knows Myers-Briggs, ENTJs, we are drivers. We are nicely known as the generals, but often known as the dictators. And and
your ID on the disc.
Yes,
so that's like even
more.
Yeah, for sure.
So we get things done, and if people get in the way, we run over them, and that's how it works. And so it's a lot of so the thing is there's a lot of strategy in that's natural, and that comes as a strength, and so on. And so then we can tend to think we're right on everything, and until you convince me otherwise. And now I adopt that, and now I'm right about that. So what I realize is that just me telling people what they should do and advising them wasn't working. It wasn't happening. In fact, in the Indonesia's context, I'm working with young Christian Indonesians who are working in Muslim majority areas. That's who they're with. And there's a lot of ethnic and religious tension, because those are tied together. And so I realized that my advice could get one of these people killed, or beaten, or thrown out of the villages they worked in. And those kinds of things happen in the context we're at. And I wasn't their supervisor, so it wasn't up to me to decide these things. And yet I was telling them what I thought they should do, because they were asking me what should do. And I was answering, right? And I felt really good about it, because they're like taking it. And like, well, thank you so much. But I realized I've got to come up with another way. And I already knew what that was because I had heard about coaching and read some books on it. I just didn't want to do it because I didn't want to ask questions and I didn't want to listen because I liked what I had to say a lot better.
You got the answers.
Yes, I got the answers. And they like my answers just fine. So what's the problem? Right. But for me, spiritually speaking, I felt like so I was a trainer is what I was doing with them from outside their organization. And so I felt like I was a good trainer, interactive, let them discover things like this. But when it came to one-on-one, I realized I wasn't equipped to help people discover what God was saying to them. So I could tell them what I think God might be saying to them, but I didn't know how to draw it out from them. And that's what coaching, that's what got me going with coaching is I could draw out what the Holy Spirit put in.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, right?
And that's what I try and do. And that's what got me going with coaching is because I started to see that as I did start to draw out from the Indonesians I was working with, I started to see first I would draw out things that were very similar to my ideas, which was probably me just manipulating with my questions. But that was early coaching. You know?
Yeah, you think that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was using coaching with the old. But then they started to come up with ideas and ways of doing things and thinking about things that I'd never thought of and that were completely foreign to me and completely new to me. And so I would help them reduce the risk on whatever those things were so that, that it's not going to get them killed. But they would go off and do it. And then they'd come back and surprise, surprise, they worked well. And I thought, man, if I had still been in my advising mode, we would have never come up with that idea because I would have never come up with that idea or that way of thinking about it and working. And that's when I started seeing really the power of coaching. So not just, I don't have responsibility for telling them, but using this methodology of drawing out what God's put in, I started to see completely, it goes back to our unique versus similar things. All people are similar and unique. I started drawing out the unique solutions for reaching their goals and solving their problems that was based off of their culture, their personality, their age, their gender, and not mine. So when I gave them advice, I tried to contextualize it, right? To try and make it fit, but it still didn't. It's still me.
Right. Yeah.
And what I can do is way different than what they might be able to do. And so when I realized, even though my questions are culturally bound, they're not anywhere close as culturally bound as my advice was. So I ask a culturally bound question, let's say, but what comes out of them is totally contextual to them. And that I really, really liked. And that's what got me going in coaching.
Again, looking at your website, you're listing some posts and some articles you've written. Something that really stuck out to me is you wrote why smart leaders don't have all the answers, even when they do. And I thought about that as you were talking just now, because even as counselors, sometimes, or mental health professionals, when we think about, we may feel like we see the bigger picture and we understand like where this person is going. But when you tell someone the answer, we give someone the answer rather than helping them understand and see it for themselves, like that's healthier and that's going to help promote longer lasting change. And so I hear that in you too, and you want to be a learner of the people in the culture that you're interacting with too.
Yeah, one of the principles that I operate off of is if you discover it, you own it. So rather than trying to get someone to buy into something or to, this whole selling process of selling ideas or selling whatever, if we can help them discover, when they discover it, they feel the ownership of it. Even to the point of they downplay your role as the coach, which is sometimes a little bit painful. We're like, wait a minute, I helped you get to that response, because
right.
Yeah, we're used to the kudos that we would get in the past when we gave somebody an insight or gave somebody a whatever, and then they do, oh, that's so good. I got to write that down,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I work part-time with teenagers at Black Forest Academy, and I had a couple experiences this week where couple of students were like, I'm just really learning this about myself. And I wanted to say, really, are you? And you learning this about your, like, trying to help point you in this direction. But fine. I don't need accolades. It's fine.
Again, you basically wrote it out for them 3 weeks ago, but that's,
Yes.
they got it.
It's fine. So we work as like mental health professionals with cross-cultural workers, and wondering what insights you would have for people, like our audience is predominantly cross-cultural workers. Just a few things that would help people that listen to our podcast sort of grow in their understanding of how to lead others well.
Well, yeah, so there's all kinds of different things. So what we do is we train people in coaching skills. In other words, how do you ask insightful questions that will generate reflection in other people? Because if people can get new reflection, they get new insights, they get new perspective. And then once they start to get a new perspective and new insights, they can come up with new actions like that. So that's what we do with that. So one of the things, if you want to just think broadly about what, if you're a team, you maybe have team leaders or other workers on here just listening, and they're like, well, so what's some tips or some techniques that would help me to lead better? Okay, so the first one that comes to mind is
KeithWebb.com.
Oh yeah, KeithWebb.com.
KeithWebb.com. There's one.
Yes.
We'll
Which
come-
we will put a link to it in our
Sure.
on our podcast.
Yeah. So the first one is that I keep seeing, and it's particularly right now because people have so much stress that is unidentified. The source of it's not identified, but it's COVID related stress. They're second guessing all their decisions. Should we go out with this couple? Should we go to this thing? Do we need to wear masks? Do we, just everything, what should we do and where should we go? And we're second guessing everything. And there's this high amount of stress that people face. And so what you get is, it's like in a pool, you have a volleyball, and you take that volleyball with one hand, you grip it, and you push it straight down in the water, okay? And you can hold it down there for a little bit, but if you move your hand just a little bit, that volleyball will come popping out to the left, it'll go poof up there, off to the right, poof up there, come and hit you in the head, in the chin, or off in front of you. It rarely comes straight up. It goes off one of these other directions. And I like that little metaphor there, because the thing is the problem is not often the problem. In other words, the problem that you're getting with your teammate or your spouse or your teenagers is often not the thing that's right in front of you that's happening. It's the problem's not the problem. The problem is something else. So for example, a long time ago, my daughter was a teenager and she comes home and she's a bit grumpy. And anyway, she snaps at me and isn't polite at all. And so I want to give her the 16-year-old girl, I want to tell her, hey, I'm your father. You can't talk to me that way. You need to show more respect. I didn't do nothing here. I don't know what you're doing, right? Instead of taking that's the problem is the problem, right? If you take that approach. Yes. But instead, I took the problem's not the problem.
Right.
And I asked some questions. And sure enough, what I found out was she was having a fight with a girlfriend at school. And she was under pressure and she was this, she was that. Asking a few questions and listening, all this starts coming out. But this came out after she snapped. With me, snapped at me. And so once once that started to come out, then all of a sudden I feel all this empathy for her, thinking, oh, she has so much going on, must be really difficult to be a teenage girl, and lots of pressures like this. So I show some empathy. So not only does she share with me, which she wouldn't have if I had corrected her before, but I get sharing, and I get then to show some empathy. And then I can add, and you really need to not talk to your mom and I this way. Yeah. I'm sorry, Dad. Right? And we get that. And that's the thing about it, is with everybody being so stressed and so pressured right now, it's not just that we need to show grace and just let it go. No, you need to ask a bit more and find out a little bit more of what's going on, because the thing that's coming out directly here might not actually be their pressure point.
Right. When you think about organizations from like a staff care or member care side, like really the primary carer is actually a supervisor. Like we think a lot of times, oh, they're these specialist organizations now have coaches and counselors and spiritual directors and all of this type of resources that are a form of specialist care. But you know, the person who has the most access and the most connection and communication is a supervisor. So why do you think it'd be helpful, and this is of course your thing, but why is it helpful for a supervisor to go through coaching training?
Yeah, well, this is exactly it. So the member care person that I know, I told him years ago, because we were in a mission at Church Resource Ministries. And so I told the guy in charge of member care, I said, you know, Alex, my goal is to put you out of work. And he says, oh, go for it. And that's it. I think if we can get every supervisor, every team leader, every field worker with a bit of coaching skills training, what will happen is you'll have people listening longer, asking more in-depth questions, not jumping to assumptions, but testing them through questions. You'll see the stories start to come out, like the story with my daughter. You'll start to see what else is going on, and then they'll be able to apply their naturals. Like, wow, I didn't realize the empathy starts leveling up, right? The grace goes up, right? All these things start to happen. And so my goal is that we train every single, not just supervisor, I want every field worker. And when we see that happen in organizations, the organization culture starts to shift. They really do they start to listen a little bit more. It's like in a meeting. You know, you're in a meeting, and what do you get? One person makes a statement, somebody else makes a statement, somebody else makes a statement to that, and then to that, right? Nobody's asking anything. And even to the point where I've been in some meetings where I saw that happening, and I said, I had some authority, so I could say it, but I said, okay, all right, new ground rule here. New ground rule. Someone who makes a statement with a period at the end, the next person who speaks has to say something with a question mark at the end. In other words, you have to ask a question about whatever was just said before another statement can be made. And it took a little bit of, there was some finger pointing. Oh, that's a question. That's not a question. That's a statement. It was.
You just had it right.
It was right. Like, it was, yeah.
Like, why is your statement so ridiculous?
Yeah. That's really a stupid idea, don't you think? No, we quickly caught on to that and outlawed that. But it was, what we found is if you asked a question about what the person just said, rather than you say your reaction to what they just said, often you'd discover that you missed the nuance of what they were saying, or you actually agreed more, or because you say a statement right after their statement, they think maybe you're disagreeing with them and you're not. You see what I mean? There's lots of communication is difficult because we all think we're clear.
Yes.
Right? That we're clear, but we're not.
Everyone else is crazy. It's not everyone else. Everyone else in my life is a terrible communicator.
Yeah.
Everyone else has the problem. I'm doing great though.
If they were a little brighter, they'd understand me.
Once in a while with Ellie, my wife, I'll get to a point and I'll say, I don't know how to say this any clearer.
What I'm hearing from you is like it's so important to build in these skills of listening well, and to help people develop empathy for other people's stories, and to sort of lead with, I want to understand you, rather than, I know it's clear, I've got this. But if you lead with wanting to know the other person, then it really frees up a lot of communication, a lot of relationship, and there's more potential for being able to lead well when other people feel heard.
Yes. When you listen to someone, they feel cared for. So they feel respected, they feel important, and they feel validated when you listen to them. When you don't listen to them, they get the opposite reaction. So, and they don't feel respected, they don't want to share more, they don't feel cared for. So listening is a big deal. Again, the reason I do these things is because leadership is about getting things done. It's not just making people feel good and be happy. It's about getting things done. When we do these things, so we're talking about, if you want to call it touchy-feely, let's listen and ask questions and help people feel cared for. The outcome of doing these things is they will get more done. So I think in your organization, the organizations that might listen to the podcast, there's a lot of people who are just like, I don't have time for that because we need to get things done, and my whole point is you can get more things done if you take this approach. So it's almost the go a little slower to go to get more done.
To go longer.
Yeah, to go longer, to get more done, like that.
I mean, the number one reason people leave the field, and this has been true as long as they've been recording this information, is from interpersonal conflict.
Yes.
Relationship conflict, most often with teammates.
Another one of my little mottos is if you change your conversations, you'll change your results. I wanted different results with my daughter, so I changed my conversation. So I didn't say, I'm your father, don't talk to me that way,
Right.
Which I could do, I could get away with, but I changed it. Instead, I asked what else is going on and this kind of thing, right? And I'm having, now they're young adults, my two kids, they're young adults. I'm changing my conversation and it's changing the results I get with them, right? And it's the same thing. I think if you change your conversation with the people you supervise, you will get different results.
I think oftentimes people who move forward into leadership or in leadership positions, they're used to success, they're used to doing well, and that's why they're often recognized and put forward into leadership. So they're used to being right. But oftentimes people in leadership, they kind of know the right way of doing things, and they've been there and they've had the experience too. So I think it is a skill worth developing and nurturing in leadership to do these things, to step back and to listen to other people's stories and to ask the good question, take the time for that.
Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's exactly about what you're referring to. So people are often put into leadership positions because of being successful at doing whatever the task is. And so then they make them a leader of other people doing that task. But there's a whole different set of leadership skills that are needed, or skills that are needed to lead people to do the task versus you doing the task.
Yes.
And it's very different. It's a whole different set of skills. And that's where people often go wrong, is they think that they can do the task via these other people, and you can't. It takes different types of skills to manage and supervise people well than it did to actually do the task of whatever they're working on.
Kind of winds up, and I think this is in a lot of cross-cultural organizations, kind of whoever has been there longest winds up in leadership positions, even if that's not necessarily their gifting, or maybe they're really good at whatever, like you said, whatever that task is, whether it's linguistic or relationship, they're going to have to learn and develop new skills. Almost never is managing people the same as managing, projects and tasks and doing the different types of work that we do.
It's very specialized, and unfortunately, many organizations don't provide practical training. They provide theoretical training for leading, but they don't provide practical management training. And that's part of why we're so enthusiastic about the results we see through just a little bit of coaching skill training in people, is it produces dramatic shifts in how they lead, how they relate to people, how they help people get things done and feel cared for and all that. It's dramatic, the change. And none of the topics that I've trained on and taught on and help people with have gotten as much of an effect as coaching skills training. And so that's why we do it.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be incredible if you think about the just retention of people, knowing that a lot of people are leaving because of conflict and relationship stuff. Yeah, how much easier it would be for teams that are under these kind of pressure cooker situations, living cross-culturally, sometimes working cross-culturally. So you're working with people that are from very different backgrounds in a country that's different and languages that are different. Yeah, if people were just equipped with some of these basic coaching skills, how much more effective we would be at retaining what is a really high valuable asset in our people.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we're after, because I remember the too valuable to lose.
Yeah.
The conclusions. I looked at it, and I can't remember it exactly because it's been a while now, but the top reasons why people were leaving, like all but one of them, could have been solved if they had decent coaching in either specialty coaching, to really get in. But if they were operating with a little bit more of that kind of communication, these problems wouldn't have gotten big, and therefore they wouldn't have turned into the big conflicts or the other is people, they're not being used out of their giftedness and calling, right? So our whole thing about coaching is it is seeing you as a unique person, and it's not trying to just slot you into a position and into a certain role that I need filled, right. But instead it's what is God calling you to do, and how do you work as a person? And so it's looking at, maybe you need to do things that you don't feel called or gifted to do, but how might you use your own strengths to do some of those things that aren't, other strengths to do some of those things that aren't your favorite things to do, right?
Right. Yeah.
And if we can, so when you're coaching well, you're helping people to define those things and find more resources in themselves and around them.
Yeah,
that's super helpful. It's also a really good picture of kind of what coaching looks like and how somebody could be coached, like what type of thing.
Yeah.
Keith, how can our listeners reach you, or if they want to know more about you or get in touch with you, what are some ways they can know?
Yeah, they can go to our training website, which is creativeresultsmanagement.com. And that's where our coaching training programs are listed. And you'll see dates there and, various programs of different lengths. They can also go to the blog that was mentioned earlier. It's keithwebb.com. And there's just a ton of articles on just about anything you'd like there.
I found some really good ones I'm going to look at later. Really interesting.
Yeah. So there's lots of articles there, but and then any of the contact forms from either one of those websites would get to me.
Tell us about your book.
Yeah. So we have a book called The Coach Model for Christian Leaders. It is a how-to book for how do you actually coach. And it's a 5-step model of what an empowering conversation looks like. And then through the book, it talks about different skills. So how do you ask questions? What kind of questions are more impactful than others? And how do you listen well? And how do you follow up? So it's very much a how-to book, and you can get it. There's a link for this store. You can get it directly from us and get a free study guide and a discount on the book from our store, or you can order it on Amazon. We sell it on ebook too. So if you got people who do an ebook, we can get it on any platform. You can go to our store and get that.
What type of person would you want to encourage to do one of your coaching trainings?
For a short coaching training, I'm looking for anybody who says they're in ministry. If you can't do this kind of communication skills that we're talking about, if you're not good at it, you're just it's not going to go as well as you'd like it to. So anything you're trying to get done in ministry and how you're trying to help people will increase with these communication skills. But the person who needs to do even more than that would be people who are supervisors, and where you are actually specializing in how do I come alongside people, help them develop, themselves, help them get things done, and without me doing it for them. And that's really hard to do, especially when you get a lot of different personalities and you've got people with different levels of involvement or engagement. You might have somebody full-time in an office where you're around them all the time, but then you might also have responsibility for a spouse who's connected to the organization but not in an office full-time. This sorts of things. How do you work with people that way? Well, we can help with that.
That's awesome.
It's been delightful to talk to you. Your passion for leadership really comes through.
It's so important because as the old saying is, people don't quit an organization, they quit a supervisor. I really want to stop that because we've got too much, people have too much invested to get out to the field for us to see them leave because we didn't take the time to care for them, equip them, encourage them,
Hear from them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's our job, but we get too caught up in doing our own ministry,
Right.
Our doing of ministry, that we don't view the supervising of people as ministry.
Right.
But it really is. One person said, if you are a team leader or a supervisor, you need to put 50% of your time into your teammates, into the people you're leading. 50%. And it's like, oh my gosh, I tried to keep it to 10%, because I had my own ministry work. And
Right.
part of it's organization stuff. The organization says you have to you continue your ministry, and we're going to give you these 3 people to supervise.
Yes.
So see, that's an organizational problem in that.
Right.
Is we haven't freed them up, or we didn't select the right people, or we didn't train them well. So there's it's a big system. It's a systemic thing.
For sure.
Yes.
But we can go after it.
Well, hey, it's been awesome to have you here. Thanks so much for being willing to jump on our podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. And bless you both.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
See you next time.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Look at you say, we'll do that.
James will do it. Yeah.
But he's got these 2 loungy chairs over here, so hopefully
Okay.
they're gonna make too much
I know.
leather farty noises.
This is pretty squeaky.
That'd be great.